Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is John Cox with the John Talks Podcast. This is episode 3 of Down to Business, and today we're going to talk about how to grow your client garden. So in episode 1, we talked about getting started, the early days of Aquavita, and things that I learned that will be helpful to you to get started right. Episode 2 of Down to Business, we talked about the mechanics of operating your business on a day-to-day basis. So this is an episode where we're going to dive deeper into how to grow your business right and steadily over a long period of time, how to do that ethically with honor in a way that increases the value of your brand, it creates a good team culture for you, and wins respect with your clients. So let's dive right in. So one of the best pieces that I've heard on this is called the Parable of the Sower, of course, which originates from the Bible. And Jim Rohn, who is probably, at least in my opinion, the father of personal growth, especially in business philosophy, he had a particularly good rendition of the Parable of the Sower. So you might want to Google that and check it out, but I'm going to do the best I can. So the Parable of the Sower, one of the assumptions that we have in this story is that the sower had good seed to start with. And the seed in this case is the service or the product. So rule number 1 is you need to have something that the market needs or the market wants. It needs to be good seed. So the sower sets out to do his thing and he starts sowing. Well, the first thing that happens is the birds come and get some of the seed. Well, you might think, man, that's not fair. Here's this guy, he's got good seed, he's doing the best he can, he's out in the field, he's sowing, and here come the birds, and the birds are taking it. And you might think to yourself, hey, that's not fair. I mean, let's say you're the sower and you're out there, you're doing your thing, you're working hard, you're sowing the seeds, and here come some birds to take some of your seed. Well, you know, the thing that didn't happen here is the sower did not leave the field to chase birds. That's just the way it is. Birds will come and take some of the seed. So in this parable, the birds could be any distraction, any life event that takes the opportunity away from you. So it could be that the prospect got distracted on their end and that opportunity was taken away from you or something along those lines, but something took it away. Well, you can either leave to chase the birds, or you can keep on sowing. And that's what the story tells us in the Parable of the Sower. The sower just kept on sowing. How clever. Well, the next thing that happened is some of the seed fell on shallow ground. And sure enough, it did sprout up, but on the first hot day, those little seeds withered up and died. And you might be thinking to yourself, man, I mean, how much hardship can this guy go through? I mean, he's sowing his seed, the birds took some of it, and now he has some little promising, tender little shoots of plants coming up out of the ground, and now they're withering up on the first hot day. But he kept on sowing. And in this metaphor, the seeds that fall on shallow ground could be that you land a client deal or close a sale, and it looks promising at the outset. And then something happens, there's some obstacle that happens after closing the deal, some hardship that comes up, whether it's on their end or on your end, but some trial that happens, and it withers up on you, and that opportunity goes away. And you know, that's just going to happen. That's life. But you got to keep on sowing. You keep sowing that good seed. So the next thing that happened in the story, as the sower is sowing that good seed, is that finally, some of it falls on good ground and it starts to grow, but the weeds come up and the weeds start to choke the plants, and the plants, sure enough, wither up and die. And in the story of the sower, the weeds that come up are called the cares of life. And the cares of life could be, gosh, your roof needs to be replaced. We had a huge storm in Tulsa that came through recently. Or your fence got blown down. Or just any of the little cares that come up to distract you away from life. And that just happens. But the sower kept on sowing. How clever. Well, eventually, some of the seed fell on good ground. It wasn't choked by weeds. It didn't wither up on the first hot day. The birds didn't get it. And sure enough, it grew up, produced good crops, and the sower was successful. All right, so now you've got a growing and mature plant. So there is a book called The Pumpkin Plan that I've referenced in the past couple of episodes by Mike Michalowicz, and it's a fantastic book. You should pick it up. Once you've got your plants growing, it's time to nurture. So it's a good opportunity that came your way. You've closed the deal. You have a good rapport with the client. Now it's time to nurture. So what are some things that you can do to nurture the relationship with your client? Be on time. Be early for meetings and deadlines. This is one of the things that I think is one of the most common mistakes for people that are just starting out in their careers. They underestimate the effect that timeliness has on relationships with clients and prospects. And timeliness, both in showing up early for meetings and in completing deadlines on time or ahead of time, is a way of demonstrating reliability, respect for their time, and it's absolutely critical and crucial. And quite often, your client or your prospect won't mention it if they're upset about that type of stuff, but I promise you that they are. And as someone who's hired people in the past as well, one of my pet peeves is when I hire someone and they don't show up to work on time. There's an expression in film production that says, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're fired. And that's definitely true of life, I think. There's an instant respect that's created when someone shows up on time or early, and preferably at least 5 minutes early. That's just such an impressive thing, and it's so easy to do. And it's one of the things that you can do to nurture an early relationship and build trust and respect. So the next thing that I would suggest is that you communicate early and often. I know that early in my career, there was almost this fear of, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I bug them too much? What if I irritate them by calling them too often or emailing them too often or texting them too often? And I will just say, I have never had a client get upset with me for communicating too often. I have had clients and even lost clients that have been upset because I or my team as a whole did not communicate with them as often as they would like and as early as they would like. And that's something, again, it's easy to do. There's a little bit of nervousness that you might need to overcome on your end, but it's something that you can do that really nurtures that relationship and builds trust ongoing, but especially early in the relationship. The next thing is to listen well. I remember a great salesperson early in my life telling me that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that's definitely true. I think that too often in a business relationship, one party, and it's usually the party that's selling or closing, will talk too much and they will listen too little. It's good to ask a lot of questions about the goals of the other person and what their expectations are for you and what success looks like for them for the project that you're working on. Ask a lot of questions and then listen well, and then repeat back to them what you've heard and make sure that you've understood them correctly, and take good notes. Doesn't help if you listen well and then don't record that and pass it on to your team. Another thing that you can do to nurture well is to underpromise and overdeliver. So what that would look like is if you have an instinct that a project is going to take you 6 weeks to complete, tell the client it'll take you 8 weeks to complete. And that way you're building margin in for the unexpected. And if you complete 2 weeks before that you said that you would to the client, awesome. You did an amazing job. Another example of that, at Aquavita, one of the things that we do is it's called a cherry on top. And so for a new client, we will complete the agreement, and during the process of negotiating the agreement, we'll listen well, and there's usually 1 or 2 things that the client would like that may not be in their initial budget. And if it's under 20% of the project value or under 10% of the project value, what I will do is evaluate whether or not it's possible for me to add that as what we call a cherry on top. So I heard this term originally from Walt Disney. When he came up with an idea, or when his team presented an idea to him, he would come back to them and say, okay, now, what can we do to put a cherry on top? In other words, what can we do to add a little bit of something extra to impress and wow our audience. And we liked that a lot. And so we do that at Aquavita. We'll typically listen for little extras that the client would like, and we'll add that as a cherry on top to the project. So that's an example of over-delivering on the client's expectations. Another thing that you can do to nurture well is ask for feedback and check on results. So don't be afraid to do this. You do have to develop thick skin, because sometimes it does hurt to have somebody tell you, I didn't like that you did that, or I wish that you would have done this better. But it's worth it, because when you can, with calmness and with professional integrity, take that feedback and implement it, your relationship becomes deeper and better with the client, and they feel like they can be honest with you. And that is worth its weight in gold by itself. Okay, so that's what you can do to nurture client relationships. Now, you've also got to kill weeds, right? Because you've got this garden, you've sown your seeds, you've got these little plants that are growing up and they're doing well, and you're nurturing, you're watering and fertilizing them by listening and communicating well and, fertilizing well. In this case, that would be with like a good product, a good service, good team culture and communication, knowing their goals. But the weeds are going to pop up, and the weeds are the distractions in life. And that can be, lots of different things. It can be little inefficiencies within your company. For example, maybe you check email too often, or in my case, particularly early on with Aquavita, I was really concerned that we were meeting our budget, and fiddling with the budget became a distraction that was comfortable for me, and I would kind of hide in the budget, if you will, and mess with it more than I should have. And the truth is that fiddling with that didn't actually achieve what I really wanted to achieve, which was to have better cash flow, which better cash flow comes from fulfilling your commitments with clients, getting good referrals, delivering things on time, and being able to invoice for that work, and so on and so forth. So it can also be opportunities that aren't a good fit for you. So an example of that would be, maybe you have an opportunity or a client in front of you, or a prospect in front of you, that looks good on its face, but you don't do a whole lot of due diligence, and you really want better cash flow this month. And so you very hurriedly get into a relationship with that person. It's maybe you bite off more than you can chew, and you end up getting into hot water. And that distracts you away from the good, promising young plants that are growing up in your garden. And now those begin to suffer, and they wither up. Well, that's not what you want, So you've really got to make sure that you're focusing on those little plants, those little clients and prospects that are growing up and producing well for you, and make sure that you're giving excellent service, and you are caring for them and nurturing them, and not getting distracted by other opportunities that are not good fits for you. Now, some clients that you take on, that you may be working with, they may not be good long-term partners for you either. There may be poor fits in team culture, or maybe your product or service isn't a great fit for them, or maybe your personalities are just not complementary to one another. And there is, in the Pumpkin Plan, a really great assessment that you can fill out, where you put the client's name, how much revenue that they produce, what their cringe factor is. And that's basically like, when the phone rings and you see that it's them, are you really happy that it's them? Or do you kind of go, and freak out a little bit? If you freak out a little bit, they're probably not a great long-term partner for you. So you should fulfill whatever obligations that you have, and then with grace, move on as professionally as you possibly can. So it's important to evaluate on a regular basis which clients are good fits for you. And there are a lot of different factors that go into that. So having an assessment like the one in the Pumpkin Plan and filling that out on a regular basis is very important. At Aquavita, we do that once a month. So I will go into QuickBooks and I will generate a sales report of all of the clients who are with us. That will include their name, the amount of revenue that they've brought in for that period, and then there's all of these surrounding questions in the Pumpkin Plan assessment. The cringe factor is one of them, but also the immutable laws in the Pumpkin Plan is another. And that's basically, do these clients have the same core values as we do? And do our cultures mesh well with one another? Do they pay on time? Is there repeat revenue potential? There's all kinds of great questions in that assessment that you can fill out. So that is basically akin to pruning the vine. So using the metaphor of a pumpkin patch, if you're growing pumpkins, not all of the pumpkins that the vine begins to produce are growing at the same rate. Some of them may be a little sickly and diseased. Some of them may just not be growing as quickly for whatever reason. And you need to, if you want to grow a big pumpkin, you need to carefully tend the vine and make sure that you are pruning as well as you can, pruning off those small diseased pumpkins that aren't performing very well, pruning off the ones that aren't growing as quickly as the large pumpkins. So you just need to make sure that you're pruning with meticulous care. So those are a few things that you can do to nurture your garden. If you have a good product or service and you conduct yourself with honor and integrity, and you nurture by doing the things that I've mentioned, you kill the weeds and the distractions, you prune the vine to get rid of the pumpkins that are not performing well for you, and with grace and professionalism, just move on from that relationship, you will eventually grow some good, solid pumpkins. And that's what's happened at Aquavita over time as we've stayed true to our values. By the way, our immutable laws, I mentioned that earlier. So I think that I may have stated this in an earlier episode, but it bears repeating. So number one is no jerks allowed. So on our team and with the clients that we serve, we want to make sure that we're working with good, ethical people. The second is blood money, which basically means money is the lifeblood of a business, and we treat it with respect. And we know that when our clients share the money that they've worked so hard to produce within their own business with us, we need to treat that with the utmost care and make sure that we're not using it in a foolhardy way. And in the same way, the money that we earn, we want to treat that carefully. So we save some, we invest some, we're generous with our team when we can be. And then the third is get rich right. So that means investing back into the business, making sure that we have things like retirement plans set up for our team, making sure that we have a good savings set up for our business, and so on. So if you do these things over time, you will naturally and organically grow your business because people will refer other clients to you. They will entrust you with more business. And we've had clients that are serial entrepreneurs that go out and start another business and another business, and they come back to us with those businesses and entrust us with those. Okay, so those are a few tips for growing your client garden. And just to recap, step one, you've got to start with good seed. And as you're sowing, the birds will take some of the seed, some of it will fall on shallow ground, some of it will be choked by weeds. That's okay, just keep on sowing because eventually some of it will fall on good ground. You've just got to keep on sowing. The next step, you've got to nurture. So be on time, communicate early and often, listen well, underpromise and overdeliver. Don't be afraid, ask for feedback and check on results. And you've got to kill weeds. Life is full of distractions. So stay focused, get in the zone, do honest self-assessments regularly. What are the big things and the little things that you do on a daily basis that may be hindering growth? Not all opportunities are good opportunities. Not all clients are good long-term partners. Get rid of weeds quickly or they'll take over your garden. And lastly, remember, you've got to prune the vine. So make sure that you're watching all of the little pumpkins that are growing. Look for the ones that are really growing quickly and doing well. Make sure that you're taking care of them. And the ones that are struggling usually aren't a good fit for you. And with grace and professionalism, just release them and continue to move on. Okay, so in the next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about the sales process, how to close deals, how to talk about money, all that difficult and uncomfortable stuff that we all struggle with from time to time. We're going to make it easy for you. If this was valuable to you, if you could please share it with a friend, subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.